In a small-town courtroom in Harrington County, a teenage girl stood by herself at the defense table, her sneakers scuffing the worn wood floor, her hands gripping a beat-up notebook like it was her last lifeline. She was up against Judge Harold Grayson, a guy who'd been calling the shots in that room for decades. A man who figured she had no business anywhere near his gavels, law books, or the heavy-duty justice he handed out day after day. He threw jabs at her right there in front of everyone. Folks who'd watched her grow up, reporters hunting for a hot story, neighbors buzzing about her weird little case. Grayson thought she'd buckle under his words, his big-shot authority, all those years he'd spent throwing his weight around without a hitch, his deep voice tossing out taunts like a storm rolling in. The crowd snickered, the air practically crackled with the vibe of her coming crash and burn, and Grayson kicked back in his tall chair, loving what he figured would be a slam-dunk put-down, a fast lesson for a kid who'd gotten too full of herself. But what went down next flipped his cocky show into a jaw-dropping win, one that shut the room up tight, left the judge with nothing to say, and had millions online hollering their heads off, fingers racing to blast the story everywhere. This is about Lila Evans, a quiet 17-year-old armed with just a spiral notebook, a borrowed pen, and a heart that wouldn't quit, who turned to getting slammed into a win that blew up online and grabbed social media by the throat. A slice of sweet justice so wild it rang out way past those courthouse walls, showing how the tiniest voice can rock the biggest room and leave the whole world staring, amazed. The Harrington County Courthouse hunkered down on the edge of town like an old watchdog, its red brick sides mellowed by creeping ivy and years of weather. Built back when the town was more dirt roads than pavement, it had that tired look of a place that had seen too many winters, cracks spidering up the walls, windows fogged with age. It was where folks came to hash out the small stuff, speeding tickets settled with a grumble, property lines argued over with red faces, or some minor dust-up that'd be the talk of the diner by noon. But today it wasn't the usual grind. Inside, the courtroom crackled with a restless buzz, a vibe that jittered through the creaky wooden pews and climbed up to the high ceiling, where paint peeled in quiet flakes. Sunlight blasted through big, dusty windows, throwing golden streaks across the shiny floor, polished to a gleam, but scratched up from decades of boots, heels, and nervous pacing. The pews were crammed full, guys in flannel shirts and work boots nursing lukewarm coffee in styrofoam cups, steam curling up as they swapped guesses about what was coming. Their faces were creased, some with curiosity, others with that "this ought to be good" smirk. Reporters from the county paper camped out up front, pencils twitching over notepads, eyes hungry for something they could slap on tomorrow's front page. A pack of teens slouched in the back row, hoodies up, thumbs flying over phones, dragged here by whispers of a kid their age sticking it to the man. The air smelled like old paper. Yellowed legal files stacked in messy piles along the walls, mixed with a sharp bite of lemon cleaner the janitor had splashed around that morning. Up front, the judge's bench loomed like a beat-up throne, its dark wood chipped and scarred from years of gavel slams, each dent a story of some final call. Behind it sat Judge Harold Grayson, his black robe crisp and spotless, running the joint like he'd built it himself. Around Harrington, he was the guy, known for dropping the hammer hard and fast, with a tongue that could slice you open before you knew you were bleeding. Today, though, the lineup threw a curveball. A teenage girl, no lawyer, stepping up to poke the town's big shots right in the eye. The tension was thick as mud, wrapping around the room like a coil ready to snap. Lila Evans stood at the defense table, her skinny frame looking out of place next to the hulking podiums and the row of stern old portraits. Dead judges staring down like they were sizing her up. 17 years old, with wild brown curls tumbling over a faded jean jacket that had seen better days. She didn't scream, "Courtroom warrior." More like a kid who'd gotten lost on her way to algebra class. Her hazel eyes flicked around, nervous as hell, but burning with a quiet stubbornness that wouldn't quit. She clutched a spiral notebook, its edges frayed and curling from weeks of frantic scribbling, and a cheap ballpoint pen she'd swiped from her mom's purse, blue ink smudged on her fingers from gripping it too hard. Lila was the kind of girl nobody noticed much. Daughter of Jenny Evans, who slung hash at the diner on Route 12, a straight A student who spent her free time helping little kids with their spelling for nothing but a smile. She was a dreamer, too, always nose deep in library books about law, her beat-up copy of To Kill a Mockingbird dog-eared and marked up like a treasure map. She'd never figured on ending up here, toe-to-toe with a judge. But when she stumbled onto the mess with the community center funds, she couldn't just let it slide. Not when it meant kids like the ones she tutored were getting shortchanged. Across the room, Judge Harold Grayson held court from his perch, his gray hair slicked back tight, every strand in line like he'd measured it with a ruler. His face was all hard lines and creases, stuck in a scowl that said he'd seen too much and liked even less. Late 60s, he carried the weight of 30 years on that bench, decades of dishing out rulings with a fist like steel and a tongue that stung worse than a wasp. His black robe hung on him like armor, not a wrinkle in sight, and his steel blue eyes glinted with the cocky shine of a guy who'd never met a fight he couldn't win. Or so he thought. Grayson was a legend in Harrington, the kind of judge who made lawyers sweat and regular folks cross the street to avoid him. Quick with a decision, brutal with anyone he thought was wasting his time, he didn't suffer fools, or kids for that matter. When he flipped through the day's cases and landed on Lila's name, a smirk tugged at his mouth, sharp and mean. "Some kid playing lawyer," he muttered to his clerk, a twitchy guy in a cheap suit who nodded like it was gospel. Grayson leaned back, already tasting the moment he'd cut her down to size, figuring it'd be quick work. Lila took a shaky step forward, her sneakers letting out a tiny squeak on the glossy floor that seemed louder than it should have. "Your Honor," she started, voice wobbling but pushing through, "I'm here to defend myself in case number 4721 about the community center funds." The words floated out, light but loaded, like they might break apart if she didn't hold them upright. She'd been digging into the town's budget for months, sparked by the way the community center, where she'd spent afternoons teaching kids fractions and letting them splash paint on butcher paper, kept losing stuff it was supposed to have. Programs got axed, supplies dried up, even though the council swore the money was there. What she found knocked the wind out of her, cash siphoned off, shuffled into dark corners where it didn't belong. No cash for a lawyer meant she'd done it all herself, filing papers, learning rules, stepping into a fight she wasn't sure she could win, but couldn't walk away from either. Judge Grayson didn't let her get far. He waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "This is a courtroom, not some high school debate club," he bellowed, voice booming off the walls like a cannon shot. Laughter rippled through the pews, nervous little chuckles from the townies, smug snorts from the reporters itching to scribble it down. Lila's cheeks flared red, heat climbing up her neck, but she didn't budge. "Do you even know what a precedent is, little lady?" Grayson leaned in, playing it up like he was asking a toddler about rocket science. The laughs hit harder this time, echoing around her, and Lila's grip on her notebook tightened till her knuckles looked like they'd pop. Every pair of eyes in the place was on her, waiting for the crack, the stumble, the moment she'd prove them right. But she wasn't about to give it up that easy. Grayson's shots kept coming, each one nastier than the last. "I've heard better from guys fighting parking tickets," he sneered, flipping her handwritten motion onto the desk like it was yesterday's trash. "You think you can stroll in here with a notebook and act like a lawyer? This ain't a playground, Miss Evans." His voice carried that bite he was famous for, the kind that made grown men squirm, and he sat back, arms crossed, waiting for her to fold. The room buzzed, some folks whispering pity, like the gray-haired lady in the third row who murmured, "Poor thing," under her breath. Others loving the show, a reporter hissing, "This is pure gold," to his buddy. Lila's pulse hammered in her ears, but she lifted her chin and met Grayson's stare head-on. "Your Honor," she said, voice smoothing out now, stronger. "I've studied up. I've got proof, bank records, emails, showing the funds got jacked." Grayson barked a laugh, short and ugly. "Proof? You wouldn't spot proof if it smacked you upside the head. Stick to your algebra homework, sweetie." The crowd's laughter crashed over her again, loud and mean. But Lila didn't flinch. She stood taller, shoulders squared like she was daring him to keep going. "I want to show it, sir," she said, voice steady as steel. That's my right under the law. The judge froze for a second, eyes narrowing like he'd just noticed her for real. The room went dead quiet, everybody holding their breath, feeling the ground shift under them. Grayson leaned back slow, smirk still hanging on but looking forced now, less cocky. All right, he said, tossing it out like a challenge he didn't think she'd catch. Go ahead and entertain us. Show me this so-called proof. But don't think I'm going to baby you through it. I've got better things to do. The crowd edged forward, air so thick you could choke on it, every single eye locked on Lila as she flipped her notebook open and sucked in a big steadying breath. Lila's hands were rock steady now, nerves burned away into something tougher, fiercer. She cracked her notebook wide and pulled out a fat stack of papers, copies she'd scraped together at the library, coughing up $1 a page from her tip jar savings. Exhibit A, she started, voice clear and sharp, flashing the first sheet up on a rickety portable screen she'd borrowed from the school AV club. Bank statements here show $50,000 yanked from the community center fund and dumped into an offshore account tied to Councilman James Reed. The room lit up with gasps, quick and loud like someone had flipped a switch. Head snapped around to Reed, slouched in the back, his face draining to a sick white. Lila didn't blink, just kept going. Exhibit B, emails from Reed and the town treasurer. March last year, hashing out how to bury the deals and split the cash. She clicked to the next slide. Black text glaring on the white screen. No wiggle room in it. The whispers turned into a low roar as she rolled out the whole damn thing. Dates pinned down, dollar amounts exact, account numbers she'd tracked through public records she'd spent nights chasing online. Under state law, Title 18, Section 641, she said, spitting out the rule like she'd written it herself. This is embezzlement, and it can land you 7 years locked up. I'm calling for an investigation. The place went nuts, reporters shouting over each other, folks jumping up cheering, some lady in the back yelling, "Give it to him, girl!" Grayson slammed his gavel down hard, bang after bang, but it got lost in the chaos. "Order!" he hollered, voice cracking like dry twigs, his control slipping through his fingers. In the third row, a college kid named Sam, lanky with a mop of dark hair, had his phone up, streaming live since Grayson's first cheap shot. That clip hit the internet like a freight train. Teen wipes floor with judge, piling up views faster than you could blink. People typing, "She flipped his whole deal on him, and this is justice candy." Grayson's big plan to cut her down had blown up in his face. Lila's quiet fire turning the tables and making her an online hero before the dust even settled. The courtroom turned into a circus, but Lila held her ground, notebook still tight in her hands like it was part of her now. Grayson tried to claw back some order. "Order!" he barked again, pounding his gavel till the wood groaned like it might split. "Order in my court, damn it!" But the crowd didn't care. Folks rushed up, slapping Lila on the back, reporters jamming mics in her face so fast she could barely see straight. "How'd you dig that up?" one yelled. "You scared of what's next?" Another tossed out. Lila just gave a small, steady smile, cool as ice. "I just wanted what's true," she said, voice soft but sure, cutting through the noise. By the time night rolled around, Sam's video had taken over the internet. 5 million views and counting, blowing up phones and feeds everywhere. Hashtags like number Lila vs. Grayson popped off worldwide. People slapping captions like, "She's the real deal," and "Judge got smoked." Come morning, the state attorney general's office jumped in, announcing a full-on investigation into the funds, and Reed threw in the towel, resigning with a press release that didn't even try to explain. Grayson got hit hard. Newspapers tore into him, big shots questioning if he could still call a fair game. Lila's win wasn't just a one-off in that room. It was a loud-as-hell lesson beamed out to the world, proving one kid with guts could knock a giant off his perch and leave him scrambling. Lila Evans showed the world you don't need a fancy robe or some high and mighty title to have backbone. It grows out of sticking to what's true and getting up when everyone else stays down. Her story's a wake-up call that real strength's in staring down trash talk and not blinking, that justice isn't just for the suits and ties. In a world that's quick to judge and quicker to laugh, she proved the quiet ones can holler loudest when push comes to shove. If Lila's fight lit a spark in you, hit that subscribe button for more stories about regular folks taking on the impossible. Drop your own tale of standing tall in the comments. We're listening. Like and share this to spread her vibe. Truth and guts can turn it all around. Let's keep the fire going.